Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Show. Coming at you live every night, not every night, every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on YouTube, Twitter, and on Facebook. I'm the host, Mark Devlin. This is Scotland's #1 politics show from a pro-UK or anti-nationalist perspective, whichever you would like to choose. Mhairi isn't here tonight. She's recovering from a cold, although she is doing the chat messages. So I'm here with co-hosts David Griffiths and Mark Zegveldt.
Good evening.
Good evening, fellows. How are you tonight, Mark?
I'm good, thanks. Been quite busy.
And what are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to talk about the Scottish Parliament and the working outside of devolution, like the discussion about the ceasefire that's coming up, instead of talking about Scottish issues.
Yes, that's definitely seems to be definitely the case. David, what have you got for us this evening?
Hi everyone. Tonight I will do my best to assess the events of the last few days really in UK politics and the likely impact on the next general election.
Right, okay, and we'll all be talking about Michael Matheson's £11,000 data bill and asking why his browser history hasn't been checked already.
Indeed we will. And of course we have Zoomer of the Week.
And we'll be back with all that and much more in just a moment. Right, welcome back to the Majority Show. I'm the host, Mark Devlin, and it's Scotland's #1 politics chat. And our aim is a better Scotland without the toxic nationalism that is strangling Scotland's potential. As usual, a huge thanks to UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages for many of you are watching from tonight. Here with co-host David Griffiths and Mark Zegveldt. Many of, as I said earlier, Mhairi hasn't been well, but she will be looking after the comments as usual. So please do keep them short and snappy, and we'll try to get as many up as possible. David, we saw you last week, but it's been a few weeks since we saw Mark. What have you been up to since then?
Trying to grow the Twitter spaces that I host on the Thursday night. They're starting to get a lot more popular and a lot more people coming in. And we're getting a lot more guests, a lot more lined up for the next few months.
Right. Well, didn't you have George Foulkes on there?
We did, yes.
And how did that go?
It was great. It was really informative about his campaign and what he's been up to. And I think it's starting to get through, especially in Westminster. I think some interesting developments might be coming up.
Oh, really? I mean, as we know, George Foulkes has been really pushing the UK Parliament to stop ultra vires spending, particularly on foreign embassies and so on. Did he say much about the progress that he's made in that so far?
Yeah, it's there's some interesting developments. You can say that's. I think that's going to. I think they're starting to. This government seems to be listening more and starting to fight back, and I do think what George is doing he's done a fantastic job. We talked about his online abuse that he receives daily as well.
Sure.
But I do think he is starting to get through.
Right. I mean, it's kind of surprising though. He's been the one who's actually been putting this together. I mean, he's a lord. Perhaps, I think most people would think, well, why is he doing it? It should be our parliamentarians that are doing it. David, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think George has been consistently outspoken. He's really taken the fight to the SNP on this question of ultra-vires spending and exceeding their, if you like, their responsibilities. And he's been the only one brave enough to do it. I think there's a reluctance in the certainly in the Scottish Labour Party to criticise too much about the SNP. I think the Scottish Labour Party, that is, see far more mileage in criticising the Conservatives than they do in criticising the SNP. And I don't think George shares that view at all. I think he's very happy to criticise the SNP, and I think it's because he's no longer in government or no longer actively involved, and he's just sitting in the Lords and being, a little bit rebellious. I think that's got a lot to do with it. I mean, rightly or wrongly, that's been Annis's modus operandi. He hasn't really taken on the SNP with as much vigour as he's taken on the Conservative Party.
Well, I suppose it's not necessarily in his interest to do so.
That's it. And this is certainly the way they view it. I think we all know that. Whereas George is just thinking, this is ridiculous. I'm not having this. And so he's got his platform down in the Lords. I don't think he thinks he can do much damage. I don't think the party thinks he does much damage either. So good luck to him. I guess that's a lot to do with it.
Right. How long did he stay on the space with you for?
He was on for just over an hour this time, but he has promised to come back and do another show. But he was on for about an hour, 15 minutes, something like that.
That's quite good.
Yeah.
Well, good. That's a good engagement. I mean, we need that more engagement in general with politicians or elected representatives, or even representatives of the House of Lords, people who have power, let's put it that way, who have the ability to challenge what's been going on. I mean, I think when we started the majority, we were like, so many people said, you're going to get online abuse and you're going to get all this. And fair enough, you do get that. But at the same time, you find as well that the nationalists are a bit of a paper tiger. They don't have. There's not much going on behind the threats and the abuse, and there's no policies, as some people might say. There's no there. So it's just that I think maybe the UK government is beginning to see that as well,
especially Penny Mordaunt.
Yes,
I think Penny Mordaunt's done a great job, and she's doing a great job holding them accountable. Yes.
Well, what's particularly interesting, of course, is that Lord Foulkes is Labour peer as well. So this is a cross-party effort, I think, not necessarily working together, but they are, putting the boot in together. Okay, very good, Mark. Good luck to you. Do you have another one coming up?
Yes, we've got one tomorrow, and I've got Jules Rolls on it from the campaign, from LGMA campaign. She's got some information that's new information that's come forward, and she's made a police complaint about Tayside Hospital. She walked into a police station and she's made a complaint. So there's a few updates on that.
Okay. Well, it's this is the thing, though. I have to commend all the people who are doing such things like that. We'll mention it now. We had one of our followers went to the police about Michael Matheson. We've had other followers and people reporting people. Like Craig Murray, for example, for his support of Hamas, and so on. So people can do stuff. And we so often think that we're, powerless, but you can pick up the phone, you can go into the police station, you can write a letter. There's all kinds of things you can do. People power. That's what we're about. Okay. Anyway, please remember that sharing is caring. Number one thing you can do for this show is to like it on YouTube. And even if you don't subscribe, please like it. So just take a second right now. Hit that like button. In fact, we have about 200 likes on the show on YouTube, and that really boosts us up and begin to get a lot more views.
Indeed. And if you can subscribe, please do so. Increase the reach of the show at the click of a button.
That's right. And as I said, Mhairi is behind the scenes getting your messages on screen, which you can see there. Please keep it short and snappy, and she'll try and put as many as she can. And then go have a good rest afterwards. Got you working, even though you're sick. Oh, poor thing. Okay, so we have a lot of things to talk about. We'll be back in just a second. Right, okay, so let's see. Have you ever been handed an excessive roaming bill and tried to fob it off as expenses? Never fear the Scottish Parliament. You can make it go away. Call 0898 cover up. Okay. Anyway, so last week, just before this show went on air, it was announced that Michael Matheson, SNP Health Minister and MSP for Falkirk West, had managed to run up £11,000 for roaming charges. The world gasped. And this was all due to a one-week holiday that he had in Morocco last New Year. The charges were said to be due to an outdated SIM card. The Parliament's previous mobile contract with EE came to an end in December 2021. Members were told to switch their devices over to a new contract with Vodafone. Anyway, he didn't. Accordingly, the bill ran up, which he said he was going to claim. He said was for parliamentary business. Now, by the way, his £11,000 iPad bill was higher than the total spending on mobile devices by all other 128 MSPs over the past 4 years. So anyway, so he talked to the Parliament, and they said they would pay 80,000 of it because it was a parliamentary expense. But the other 3,000 also come out of expenses, coming out of his office expenses, as well. Let me see. I've got a clip of this. I'll have to find it. Just give me a second. This is him answering the initial questions.
Can you explain that it's been caused by an outdated SIM card that was in an iPad that I had for constituency purposes, which was a parliamentary iPad, and it hadn't been replaced. I wasn't aware that it had to be replaced, and the cost built up as a result of that. And as the Parliament also stated very clearly, is that the network provider didn't provide information around the costs that were being incurred as well. So it was something that was unknown to me as well, and as the Parliament have also confirmed that
okay, I don't know why that's not played. It's supposed to. Wait, okay, what was that strange noise there?
Strange.
Okay. Anyway, that was him making excuses. The dog ate my homework, basically, but that is not good enough. Has he never heard of Wi-Fi or a spend cap? Have you ever had excess roaming charges? Any of you two?
No.
And we used to go on holiday to like Mediterranean countries at the time before there was free roaming, really, because if you remember, Mark D, you weren't.
No, yeah, I read about it at the time.
Right.
Yes.
In the old days, it used to be if you went abroad to a European country, you'd pay small roaming charges, and you had to set up an account before you went. Otherwise, you just paid ridiculous charges. And then they scrapped it for a long time when we were still in the EU, and it's only in the last couple of years since Brexit that they've come back in again. So anyway, the reason I'm saying this is we were absolutely vigilant about not letting the kids accidentally run up massive bills. So the idea of being on streaming via data usage abroad, I mean, you'd have to be a complete idiot to do that.
No, it's the same. I remember one time I went to Japan, and I was so aware of the roaming charges. Basically, I was looking for Wi-Fi, and the place I was staying in didn't have any Wi-Fi. The only place I could get Wi-Fi was outside McDonald's, or sitting in McDonald's. So I hanging around outside McDonald's with the phone, desperately trying to get the connection. I mean, that's the kind of lengths you go through to avoid roaming charges. Everybody knows this. That's part of it. Exactly. So his pal Hamza Yousaf came out to defend, saying it was a legitimate expense and that he shouldn't have to pay back the money. Well, that didn't last too long because very shortly he did decide to pay the money anyway. Yep. And that actually raises just as many questions as it answered. Here he says, I have contacted the Scottish Parliament authorities this afternoon to make arrangements to reimburse the full cost of the £10,935.74 incurred in roaming charges. While the Parliament agreed to pay the bulk of this sum as a legitimate expense, with the rest being met from my office allowance, I have reflected long and hard and accepted the SIM card in its device should have been replaced at an earlier stage. So at this point, though, we have to note that Mr. Matheson gets a yearly salary of £118,511 and expenses of £60,700 to cover constituency work, including employing a staff, running an office, and paying for excessive iPad roaming charges, it says here. Anyway, so today, but the story goes on. It goes on and on. Now he's got, today the Scottish Parliament released data usage, and it turns out he racked up most of the charges in 2 days. December the 28th and the 2nd of January. Let me see if I've got this somewhere here. It will be somewhere. Here it is. Here's take the BBC's word for it. There. Anyway, okay, so what have you got to say about that, David? What do you think?
Well, I think it's. I have to say, Mystic DG 5 days ago did say, I wonder if there was anything interesting happening back at home on these days, particularly on the days when he spent a lot of money on roaming charges and data usage. And since then, it has emerged that 2 particular days, those 2 days, 20th of December and 2nd of Jan, including especially the 2nd of Jan, where he spent more than £8,500 on 2 separate connections. The 2nd of Jan, there was a notable event that took place, which was Rangers played Celtic that day.
That's a notable event.
Exactly. And then the 20th of December, Celtic played Hibernian. Now, both of these games were screened live on Sky Sports. And of course, you can get access to games abroad on Celtic TV, Rangers TV, if you really want to. But you have to access the internet first, unless you're in a public place which is showing it. So it could be entirely coincidental that Michael Matheson, who famously labelled the song the Hokey Cokey an anti-Catholic song, it could be an entire coincidence.
Wait a minute, I missed that bit. Wow. The Hokey Cokey is anti-Catholic.
The Hokey Cokey apparently goes back to days of what do you call that stuff? Superstition. And they thought that the Hokey Cokey was some sort of if you like, a play on or a jokey representation of the Catholic ceremonies. That's what is believed, and among certain people who are maybe a bit tinfoil hatted, that's what the Hokey Cokey came from. More normal people would think it just teaches children about movement in song. But anyway, so that's it. So this is Michael Matheson's background, if you like. Now, I don't even know if he supports Celtic. I have no idea. But it's a huge coincidence that on the 1st of January, there was absolutely nothing in his constituency that made him go on to even look at one email. So maybe you don't get health emergencies in Scotland on New Year's Day. They all wait until the 2nd of January until they come up. That could be it. And then 4 times as many as any other day that you're on holiday happens. Just so happens that the biggest days coincide with something I predicted 5 days ago. I wonder if there was anything happening enough to screen 4 football matches involved.
Yeah, and it's also because, as some of our commenters pointed out, January 2nd is a public holiday in Scotland.
Indeed it is.
So he wouldn't call for any work, actual work. Mark, get any thoughts on this part of it?
Yeah, I think, like David, I don't believe in coincidences. Oh, well, maybe 1, but 2, nah. No, I'm sorry. It's I think it's glaringly obvious what he was doing personally, and I think, I think his attitude gives it up. Right. I think the way the open and transparent government was supposed to be having under Hunza, it's less transparent than under Sturgeon. It's
I don't think you know what transparency means.
Well, Hunza today, he said, "Oh, we've been talking." He was asked a question: "Can he concentrate on his day job, the health service?" And Hunza says, "Oh yes, we talked about it for a day. Mm-hmm. We talked about the health service for a day. So one day, well done. We've got the worst health service in the UK. We've got waiting lists." Getting worse and worse and worse, bigger and bigger and bigger waiting lists. Yeah. And he concentrates on the health service for one day and they talk about it.
Well, that is a good point. In all of this, we do have to remind ourselves that Mr. Matheson is the health minister, or health and social care, or something like that, right? And minister, whatever, the Scottish NHS is fully devolved. So I suppose he should be doing some work on that. But basically, the worst weekly A&E statistics since January were recorded at the start of November. In the week ending November 5th, only 60.9% of emergency department attendees were seen within 4 hours. Only 60%. Okay. And then 3,735 patients waited over 8 hours, with 1,660 waiting over half a day, which it kindly says is 12 hours here. Doctors have warned that they face one of the worst winters ever in the festive period, and A&E figures could plunge to record lows in that time. Now, perhaps if some of the money that was spent on his roaming charges were applied to that, you could maybe make 1 or 2 people's lives in the queue a little bit better. perhaps. Not to saying that perhaps it's not necessarily that it's a big amount of money in the scheme of things, but there does seem to have the stench of some kind of cover-up here, that basically we're not being told the truth about what the data is for. Surely he should fess up and say, yeah, it was my kids streaming Finding Nemo, or my wife streaming Titanic, or such a thing, or watch the Celtic game. But the problem then, of course, is that is not parliamentary business, and the Scottish taxpayer should not be paying for it. It's imperative, I think, that his browser history is checked. Now, who knows what else might come up on there. But they did the Scottish Parliament did actually have a look at his iPad. This is the worst part about it, I think. They said they examined it to ensure it was functioning properly and checked the mobile data usage. And that was it. They didn't look at anything further than that. I mean, it really has a feeling of like fiddling your expenses, David. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think it's very notable that the IT team didn't feel, if you like, empowered to check his browsing history, which was the first thing you would do. They presumably did a check simply on the basis that, okay, did he really use that much data? Yeah, he did actually, right. Okay, and are these costs accurate? Yep, those costs are accurate. Nothing wrong with his PC. No, sorry, there's nothing else we're going to do. But their statement after he made his claim that the IT team had checked it all out and had confirmed that it was legitimate parliamentary business, they completely contradicted that by saying, no, we didn't look at that. We didn't want to look as if we weren't taking his word for it, so to speak. So if you put in a claim and say, yeah, it was all parliamentary business, when it wasn't, yeah, that's fraudulent. Absolutely.
Yes, that's fraudulent.
Just the way that it went, him saying it was all parliamentary business and it's been checked. Oh, great. Okay, well, just tell us what your browsing history was. Well, I've paid a few quid of it already because it was all parliamentary business, but I've looked in my conscience and I've decided that I'll pay the whole lot now. Well, you wouldn't do that, would you? Seriously. If something had been legitimate business, you'd say, no, it's definitely legitimate business. Here, have a look. That's what you do. You wouldn't say, damn, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll pay it. Right, how's that? I went, hang on, why? You don't have to pay it. Just tell us what you were doing, So
this is a good point here from Mr. Tommy Boy, 75. He says, I used to process expenses. Who authorised it? Because someone did sign off on it, right? You can't go. I was reading his article as part of the research for this about a guy in Citibank, and he went and he was working in a foreign trip or something like that, and they found out that he'd charged the company for 2 coffees at the meeting, right, for someone else, and they've fired him because of it.
Oh.
Right, because he made a false claim. I mean, this is the thing, as Sean Geddes says here, it's only taxpayers' money, right? But even if it pays it on the expenses, it's still taxpayers' money, right? Yeah. It should be his own personal money, which, okay, he gets a salary and he should be paying it from that, not the expenses that he gets. Right. He should be paying it from his own salary. Yep. That's not what he's saying at any point during this at all.
No.
Now, he was reported to the police, but it didn't actually by one of our followers. But it didn't seem to go anywhere. Any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, I think at the moment, there's nothing. I agree with the police. There's nothing at the moment that they can do, but it doesn't mean in the future when more evidence or more comes out that they won't take action then.
Yeah, true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does say something like
because at the moment,
time, right? Yes.
At the moment, it's his word against others that he didn't use it for parliamentary or his constituency. So there's no evidence to show either way.
No.
So until they get the data and they have a look at the iPad and they find out what he's actually used it for, that's when the police can maybe start an investigation.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy with that. But I think we do need to know. There's no good. Humza saying it's finished now. That's it. It's end of it. Humza can say that as much as he wants. That's not his decision.
No.
Yes, that's correct.
I think the public need to know now what's on that iPad.
Yes. And then, of course, if it's been scrubbed, it puts up some more questions. Here's Humza anyway talking about his support.
Absolute and full confidence. He's doing an excellent job steering our health service through what has been the biggest challenge of its 75-year existence, the recovery from the global pandemic. I think the matter, I've drawn a line under the matter. I think the case is closed. Michael has examined the expense. Of course, the Parliament investigated it, and he's made a decision to pay back the full amount. That, to me, draws a line under the matter.
Oh, the Parliament investigated it? Maybe not. Okay, any final thoughts on this one, David?
Yeah, draw a line under it is something that John Major introduced as a discussion item in politics when he tried vainly to stop discussion of sleaze matters back in the 90s. When politicians say we want to draw a line under it, it means they know it's not going away. That's what always happens. You know it isn't going away. The Conservative Party in Scotland almost certainly will call for a vote of no confidence if he doesn't hand back the item. So yeah, I mean, nobody can say all he likes. It's not going away.
That vote of no confidence won't go that well. It's my microphone off. Yeah. Okay, that vote of no confidence won't go that well, will it?
Not at all. The Greens will. You can tell they'll stick by him, but it's going to be the optics will be fascinating if the Greens and the SNP are saying, of course, he should be allowed to use his parliamentary equipment to do personal stuff abroad, because let's not kid ourselves on, and I hope the opposition MSPs make this point, you would not pay it back if it was parliamentary business. Why would you? For what reason? Just out of altruism? Of course you wouldn't. You would say, no, I was doing my work, sorry, I made a mistake, but this is what I have a budget for. And rather than that, he said, oh yeah, well, shouldn't have done that, so here, I'll pay for it all. Right, okay, I accept it, but it was all legit. Rubbish. Nobody believes.
Well, if he was a normal person, if you were a normal person, you get a bill like that, you'd just be like, I'm sorry, I just can't pay this. And then you'd go to the ombudsman or something like that, and you'd say, look, it was a mistake, and make some deal with it, because no one's going to be no mobile. I don't know actually. There's a mobile company going to make you bankrupt over some roaming fees for 2 or 3 gigabytes or whatever it is. I don't know. So that whole avenue has been closed down as well. I mean, it would have been faster, cheaper flying back, right?
Yep,
business class, and going to the match, having tons of a whole room full of Buckfast, and having a great time with all his pals, and then going back.
Yep,
still be less money. Anyway, all right, okay, we need your help. Thank you for watching tonight. Big shout out to everyone who has donated to keep the show going. If you're watching the show on YouTube, you can make a super sticker or super thanks donation. We'll try and pick those up and give you a shout out, but it's not that easy to see them when they're coming through for some reason. But we appreciate them nonetheless. If you're not on YouTube, please go to the Majority site where you can pledge a monthly or one-time donation starting from just £2 from a regular donors put in £2 a month, which helps cover stuff like software, equipment, bills. We're getting some news. We're still having trouble with the audio, as you can tell. So please, if you can donate something, please do that. Coming up, David is going to talk about the momentous events of the last week in UK politics.
Indeed, I am. As the cliche goes, a week is a long time in politics. Well,
it is indeed.
True, indeed. Then in the last 7 days, in fact, the last 3 days have been pretty spectacular. So this time, for once, the action is centred mainly on Westminster, but of course it will have an impact on Scotland. On Monday morning, just as a reminder, we saw a rather rushed Conservative cabinet reshuffle. Controversial Home Secretary Suella Braverman was sacked and replaced by former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. And the bit none of us saw happening was that, unbelievably, James Cleverly was replaced as Foreign Secretary by ex-Prime Minister David Cameron. Yes, call me Dave.
Shocking.
I know, who stepped down as an MP in September 2016, let's not forget, over 7 years ago, after losing the Brexit referendum, is back in the cabinet. And in order to rejoin the cabinet, because you have to be either a member of the House of Lords or the House of Commons, unless you're somebody like the Solicitor General in Scotland, you have to be appointed a life peer. So he's now Lord Cameron, which was again rushed. Yeah, so I mean, just utter farce. So as a Lord, he can't enter the House of Commons, of course, because it's the Commons. So he can't be questioned by MPs in any decisions he makes. So this is just farce. So
it's insanity, isn't it?
Completely. Now let's not forget, in terms of his legacy, He's the guy who inflicted on the UK both the Brexit referendum, but before that, he was the genius who came up with the idea of giving Alex Salmond a Scottish independence referendum, which would settle the deal once and for all. How did that work out, Dave? Anyway, and let's not forget, he was the Prime Minister who won the 2015 general election with an unexpected majority after the Con-Dem coalition government of 2010. It was widely expected that there would be another hung parliament. What happened? 56 out of 59 Scottish seats went to the SNP. That's how well your plan to end all talk of independence worked. Call me Dave. Bravo. So what was your view of this move by Rishi Sunak and Mark D?
I just think it's nonsense. I mean, really, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like, are they just making stuff up as they go along? Well, I think they are. There's no sign of any type of strategy or long-term vibe about anything. And now, specifically about Cameron, I mean, you should never have indulged a referendum. Why on earth would you indulge a toxic minority in one part of your country with the aim of breaking up the country, breaking up the military, social, economic, and financial integrity of the country because Alex Salmond wanted a referendum? I mean, come on, the first thing you should say to Alex Salmond is, yeah, have a nice day. The door's closed. That's exactly the type of approach should have been taken, because what happened then was it motivated, the referendum motivated them. The thought that they could even actually get a referendum motivated them. That's what's been motivating them these past years after they lost the referendum. The fact that they could possibly get one because a precedent was set. We had one before. Now it's all a matter of just getting more support to do that again. So, you know, he is the cause of disharmony for years. And I mean, that's putting aside the Brexit, which is a different kettle of fish, I suppose. It gave the Nationalists everything they wanted as well to do it. Now, the only thing that can be said about this is that we had a referendum. So on our side, you can say we had a referendum. But as I said, trying to say that against people who are motivated to get another one is, you know, it's hard going, and it has been hard going for the past few years. And then they didn't follow up. This is the big thing. He didn't follow up with legislation afterwards to say, you had your chance, you lost. That's it. We're going to make it twice as difficult next time, or whatever. We're just going to take it off the table entirely. No, they didn't do any of that. They just in fact, he went off of this English laws thing and just riled up all the Nationalists straight away. So, you know, that's aside from the fact that doesn't Rishi Sunak have any other talent available?
Yeah.
I mean, Mark Z, what do you think about that?
I think it's desperate politics. I look at it this way. I'll put it this way, analogy. A football manager loses 10 games in a row. And what does he do? They start changing the team. And he starts changing the team just for changing the team's sake, because he's lost 10 games in a row. And Sunak's the same. He's in such dire trouble, and he's just desperately trying to keep it, reshuffling the pack to see if he can get a formula where the public start to back him, and he's just getting himself in such a mess.
Shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah,
I would say
it's just desperate politics. I think it's the end of a cycle for the Conservatives. I don't think there's much they can do that now, where they're not going to lose the election. I think only Labour can lose the election for themselves.
That's the effect of it. I mean, who are they going to bring back next, David? The ghost of Edward Heath?
Exactly right. This is who could it be next? Norman Tebbit? Oh, God knows.
Yes, exactly that type of thing.
Quite. So, and of course, moving on since then, we saw the fallout from Suella Braverman's sacking, when she wrote the most vicious resignation letter or outgoing letter to a Prime Minister I think anyone has ever seen, rubbishing his performance and rubbishing his personal integrity as well. I mean, quite. It was certainly a memorable letter, so good luck to her for doing it. She certainly didn't miss him and hit the wall, as they say. And today, even more, we saw the Supreme Court ruling, just as Braverman had predicted yesterday, that the Supreme Court ruling would go against the UK government, which it duly did. We cannot send illegal arrivals, we can't deport them to Rwanda because it's not considered a safe place for them to be processed, I guess. And now we've also interestingly seen 5 junior ministers resigning since Braverman went. And the suspicion there is they think that they might not be able to take up another position until 6 months' time, which coincides, of course, with next May, which is now looking possibly a little more likely since this move as the next election date. That's a feeling I've been told. The other feeling, which is quite widely held, is that Sunak has made his cabinet more centrist, less right-wing, clearly, and more pro-Remain, interestingly. And the feeling being that with inflation, which did fall sharply today or yesterday, so in line with the Conservative policy aims, Sunak, it seems, is now readying himself for a spring election should economic indicators continue to be positive. Like if inflation goes down,
it's all based on this, economics and so on. And I think that most people aren't really bothered by that as much. I mean, do you think that's the thing that's motivating, Tory core voters? Yes, I really want the inflation. Have you ever walked around the streets and heard anyone say, "I really want the level of inflation to come down"? It's it's not
exactly. It's this. He's making a play here soon. He's obviously thinking, right, okay, the Red Wall, well, probably won't vote for us again. And I know they're very pro-Brexit, and I know they're probably pro-immigration controls. So, well, don't really need that sort of thinking. I know what we'll do. Let's just focus on the economy. It's the economy they'll get. Right, okay, well, it might win you some votes down in the southeast, but I can't see it resonating either in Scotland or in the areas of England where the Conservatives won the seats that gave them victory the last time round. So it's very high risk indeed. So I think it has made an election, an early election within the next year, more likely. But I think Cameron's involvement, is an utter disaster. As I said on Twitter, it's the most grotesque political appointment since Caligula's horse. It's just ridiculous.
I just like the way Humza has called for an early election.
No, it's ridiculous.
The man has no political nous whatsoever. He either wants it or why would he call for an early election when he's going to get all the polls are showing that he's going to get wiped out in an election? He's got no political nous whatsoever, that man.
No, his political judgment is non-existent, and he says the wrong thing constantly. He makes the wrong decisions constantly. He's either very badly advised or he doesn't listen to advisors. A bit of both, I think. Yes, he's
surprised if he listens to. I would be surprised if he listens to any advisors giving us output. Anyway, it seems to me there's been a movement away from the kind of big tent of earlier Conservative administrations to split the party. The party did split, right, because of Brexit. But now the party is kind of healing. You could say it could be healed. Someone could unite the two sides. That's the thing, right? It could be healed. But what Sunak is doing is basically making a choice. He's saying we're this kind of managerial class, patrician class almost, who are into management.
Yes.
And they seem to be they're in their bubble and they think they're doing good stuff. But while the members are like, you're just not listening to us at all. And this is very similar, I think, to the situation that's been happening with the Scottish Tories in Scotland. So where they completely ignore the membership or people who are potential Tory voters. For example, they completely ignored the 1 million Scots who voted for Brexit. They would never say anything about. There was not a single engagement to that huge amount of people, right? Because they thought Ruth Davidson was a Remainer, and the whole thing is they're just too good. They're just too good for us. That's the thing. And then we saw this recently. There was a poll. We talked about this in the show, but maybe a month back. They did a poll that showed that 50% of their members wanted to abolish or roll back Holyrood's powers. And what did they say from that? They used it to attack David Frost for arguing against devolution, basically. So they just want to ignore all the time. And I think a lot of these people, it seems to me, their main motivation is fear. They're scared of doing anything that will upset their opponents. And whether this is Sunak or whether this is the people who run the Scottish Tory party, they're always trying to reach out to people who don't like them.
Yep.
And in doing so, they reject the people the core vote, who could like them, and just say, can you not just stop this boat thing? That's the thing. It's a totemic issue. It has to be stopped. That's what Tory voters want. And they're like, no, we can't do it. Oh, there's some legal thing. You know, on it, okay, might be a legal thing, sure, but you weren't voted in to go, oh, it was a legal thing. You're voted in to get action and results. That's what you're voted in for. And whether your opponents don't like that, as many, of course, they don't like it, then what does that matter? Right? You're supposed to do your thing for your core support, but bolster that first of all. Anyway, be conservatives. That's
quite indeed. I thought it was very interesting that James Cleverly, in his first interview, which was only about a minute and a half, mentioned stop the boats 3 times. So he's obviously been told, right, you've got this job, and your job is to
He's
stop.
not going to be able to do that. It's nonsense. They can't do it. They can't do it. They've not got the mindset to do it. That's what it comes down to. They just don't. They're thinking, well, just try and get by without doing this before, or we've given it lip service before the election.
Sure, and I think that's exactly it. He'll be told, make sure you keep mentioning stop the boats. So give the impression that we're trying to stop the boats. There is not a chance, not a chance. Their big flagship marquee policy to do exactly that has just been thrown out. So I mean, guys, just don't treat us like fools. But you definitely see it now. The Labour Party lead up until the start of this week was consistently 20 points. It's now 30 points. People don't like prevaricators. People don't like people in parties and politics who say one thing and do the other. It just doesn't happen.
Well, so that's not what they were. They threw away I mean, we could go on. You could go on all day about this. They threw away an 80-seat majority.
Yeah.
Right, because they didn't do what their voters wanted. And so they deserve to be punished in that sense. And what the thing is, I do worry a little bit what's going to happen to the Scottish Conservative seats, right? Because there are 6 at the moment, and there's a potential to get more, actually. But with all this nonsense, maybe those are in doubt. Maybe you should put that into your guide.
Voting guide, indeed. At the moment, I'm thinking, this has really upset the apple cart. Your analysis here is exactly right. The 6 seats they have, at least 5 of them they've got a really good chance of retaining all 500. Bowie might be in a bit of bother, but there are additionally a couple of seats they could win. But remember, if this is going to be a Labour landslide next year, that will have massive momentum, and that will hugely impact the Conservative vote, even in Scotland. And we know that the SNP is going to lose votes here. So this is what I said when I caveated the tactical voting when I first produced it and first just demonstrated it. I said, bear in mind, it's possible that Labour could sweep the boards next year, and it's become a lot more.
Well, it's becoming a little bit harder. Alan Jack put a note there. Breaking news: 3 Labour MPs just quit their positions. Rayner returned to the back benches. But, I mean, I don't know if supporting terrorists is really a good look. And some respect to Keir Starmer for holding the line on this, considering the big Muslim support. And let's say pro-Palestinian support as well in his party. So that's that. Okay, so a lot going on in UK politics. How it affects Scottish politics? It does affect Scottish politics. There's no point in us like going, all right, okay, we can tactically vote for Labour and Labour's a disaster, or Labour needs to get back SNP voters, and then you're like, oh, God. But we'll see how there's still some time to go before the thing. Coming up next, Mark's going to talk, we're going to have a discussion about Scottish Parliament talking about stuff that's not actually stuff they should be talking about. We'll be back in a second to discuss that. Right, glad to have you with us tonight. Mark's going to talk about Scottish Parliament doing something.
Yeah, it's something that really does concern me and really annoys me is this now the discussing the ceasefire in the Middle East and having a debate on it, and they're going to vote on it, which has got no bearing on it whatsoever. It's going to have no political interest. People in Scotland want the floods. They want money for the flood victims. They want the houses back. They want the health service fixed. They want the schools to be fixed. They want education. That's what we want to be talking about in a devolved administration.
That's what it's set up for.
Yeah, this idea that it's a government should never have been allowed in the first place, because they're acting outside of reserved issues and devolution issues. They're acting outside of devolution issues on all sorts of issues that they're talking about, that it's been voted in Westminster, this, about the ceasefire. Why is it being discussed and voted at the Scottish Parliament level? It makes no sense. And it's another way. It's another way of saying, well, we're a government. We are a government. But in 2014, we rejected that.
Yes.
We voted for one government for the whole of the UK.
Yes, and before that as well. I mean, in the initial devolution vote, it wasn't. It was made very clear this was a devolved parliament that was going to look after local issues, and the Scotland Act was set up to do that, and that's where the reserved issues initially came from. 2014 referendum reinforced that idea. In fact, the Scottish government, unfortunately, Scottish Parliament got more powers during that, but due to weak Tories, primarily. But anyway. So yeah, I think this is a thing that I wonder though, shouldn't the presiding officer be able to say something?
Well, right? Yeah, it should never be allowed.
Shouldn't you just say no? This is outside a remit. This is the wrong thing, David.
Yeah, 100%. And this is what frustrates people most of all about the presiding officer. She routinely lets MSPs not answer questions. She routinely allows discussions on subject matters which have absolutely no bearing on the Holyrood legislature at all. Yesterday, I don't know if you saw Alex Cole Hamilton talking about yet another discussion about independence, and he said, frankly, I don't even know what we're doing here.
Oh yeah, it was the white paper. Was another white paper, right? Absolutely. You know, but independence is a dead issue. It's completely dead. It's against. They're not allowed. Shouldn't be allowed to spend any money on it. Yeah. It shouldn't be brought up in the Parliament. And you know, this is the thing. It's taking up a just direction away from other things. Now, surely, for example, we've got this. Here's an example. This Storm Babbitt funding, you know, for the people in Brecon. And what they're getting is, you know, consultations and all this type of stuff. No money in the ground. Meanwhile, he's unilaterally sending £750,000 to Gaza for, you know, humanitarian aid, and you know, so it seems like when it's a pet project, something can get done pretty fast. But when it's the actual business of government, or well, let's call it a local government, that's what it's supposed to be. When it's actual business that should be in their purview, then they don't care about it.
They set up a task force. And this task force for the floods, they've never met yet.
Yeah,
they haven't had one meeting, not one meeting. And the people are really suffering. You know, they're not going to get in their own houses for Christmas. They're desperate for funding. And what does Humza turns around and says? Well, funding won't be available for the foreseeable future.
There you go.
But we will discuss it.
You know.
Well, here's the thing here. They saw this morning. Richard Leonard, who should know better, better, calls on Labour MPs to back Gaza ceasefire. It's like, you know, okay, he's an MSP. Okay, so Labour MP, and he's perhaps in there, but this motion that's happened in the Scottish Parliament was initiated by Ross Greer. I mean, it's like, come on, it's bad enough that they're discussing Gaza in there, but it's been led by the Toxic Greens. I mean, really, come on.
Yeah, it's going to be all it's going to be is. Let's have a ceasefire, but it will be on the Israeli side.
Exactly.
Stop Israeli from bombing Hamas. But it's never once have they mentioned the hostages.
No,
they've never mentioned the rockets, several hundred rockets a day being fired into Israel. That's never mentioned. They never say, well, let's stop that. Let's get the hostages back and let both sides discuss a ceasefire. And then see where you are.
But I mean, it's not even. It's not to do. I mean, it's not even to do with the UK Parliament, right? We can have an opinion on it as individuals. UK Parliament can make a motion and apply Foreign Office pressure there, right? But ultimately, it's going to be Israel. It's going to decide what's going on there. Now, the pressure can be put, but you can't put pressure from a regional assembly. It's like saying, "Oh yeah, okay, Irvine Town Council has voted for, you know, that there should be a Gaza ceasefire." You're like, "What?" You know, that type of thing. You're like, "No, that's not how it works." You know, you've got no thing in there.
We've heard Humza say Scotland's leading the way in the Middle East of the ceasefire. It's absolutely. It's just if it wasn't as stupid, it'd be, you'd be laughable.
But there was another Labour MSP yesterday presented a bill saying we call on the UK government to stop selling arms to Israel. Okay, great. What's going to be the net impact of that? It's going to strengthen Hamas and Hezbollah. Is that really what you want, guys?
It's just so much grandstanding. That's what's
right. It's a joke.
They're using this issue. Actually, what they're doing is they're using the death of Jews to grandstand.
Quite.
And that's pretty sick, actually, I think, here. Trying to give the impression that people of Scotland are for a ceasefire. No, I don't think so. The majority of Scots are against terrorism, and even at the best case, they're like, let's them figure out what they're doing down there. We have real issues to deal with. We've got the storm damage, we've got a health service that's failing, education that's a disaster. You could go. We've got a laundry list of all these things that have been a disaster. And what are they doing? They're sitting there gabbing off about that. So I should have worn my Abolish Holyrood t-shirt, because I would say, look, you can put the Abolish Holyrood and you can buy a t-shirt at the majority store as well. Because it's just, it's just, why? Why? It's just wasting your time. This fake idea that this is really a government, as Mark says early on, and that, it's an assembly, a regional assembly. That's it. So
no more.
It's, thank you for that, Mark. Okay, thank you for being with us tonight as we go through the horror show of Scottish politics. If you can, please subscribe to the show and leave comments on YouTube so we can grow there. Well, you can subscribe if you like. That would be great, of course. Ring the bell, as I always say, as well. But if you just like the show, that's the easiest thing you can do to really help. But you can also make a donation. You can buy a t-shirt or a mug. Go to our website, get an Abolish Holyrood mug. And you can also tell your friends about us, and you can do all of the above, which makes us happy. So coming up, it's a moment you've all been waiting for. It is the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the week. David, can you go first, because I have to do something to get mine ready?
Of course, no problem at all. Okay, I'll go for it. Yeah, okay. So my nomination this week for Zoomer of the week is SNP Transport Secretary Mhairi McAllan. Young Mhairi, who many see or saw certainly prior to Humza's arrival as the heir apparent to Nicola Sturgeon, Mhairi spoke out this week to criticise the Edinburgh Trams inquiry. Now, bear in mind the Edinburgh Trams project ran 2 years late and several times over budget, costing the taxpayer an additional £500 million. A report was produced by the inquiry as a result of the inquiry, and it largely blamed the failure of the project, or the difficulties encountered in the project. Largely, they were blamed on Edinburgh Council and the then Finance Secretary, John Swinney. Swinney was in fact named more than 100 times in a derogatory way in the report, with several of his decisions blamed for the cost and delivery overruns. Swinney was blamed specifically for insisting that Transport Scotland become less involved in the project. So that meant that the one organisation with experience in transport system was excluded from key decisions, which were instead made by a city council and SNP politicians with the entirely predictable outcome. So that was what the report said. Mhairi, however, claimed that the evidence heard from the report, heard in the construction of the report, does not support the conclusions drawn by the inquiry. Mhairi insisted instead that the exclusion of Transport Scotland by John Swinney ensured that government, i.e. taxpayer funding of the project, was not a penny more than £500 million. Well done, John. That was way to go.
Right.
So, it's just a laugh, isn't it? So, but unfortunately, when a request went in, I think it was the Express ran a really good article on this. A request went in to say, okay, well, can you back up Ms. McAllan's claims that the conclusion did not reflect the evidence? The SNP exec replied that, well, we don't have some of the information you require, and to be honest with you, the minister was really just giving her opinion. Great. So she was just giving her opinion. So no, just anecdotal then, not empirical. So it seems clear that Mhairi McAllan, the rising star of the SNP, has fully embraced their policy of ignoring or trashing any critical report conclusions, refusing to accept any responsibility on the part of the SNP, quite literally making up stories to back up her assertions or beliefs, and generally just being a company woman. So very, very disappointing from one of the SNP's rising stars, but sadly not remotely surprising. No wonder she's getting on so well at such a young age. So for that reason, Mhairi McAllan is my nomination for Zoomer of the Week.
Just endless obfuscation. I like that word. I can hardly say it. But anyway, that's it. Just terrible, really. Yeah. Right. Okay. Good candidate there. We're back in a second with mine. So I don't know about you, but when I sit down to watch a movie, I don't expect to be subjected to nationalist grievance. The other night we sat down to watch Gerard Butler's latest actioner, Plane. I don't know if you've seen it. It's been out for a wee while. Gerard plays the captain of a passenger plane that loses all electrical power in a storm, and through his acting skills and CGI, he manages to get the aircraft down on the ground, only to find out that the island is populated by bandits. And that's not a spoiler, by the way. That's in the movie's blurb. It would have been better, though, if it had been cannibals. I would like to have seen at least one person being eaten in this movie. Bandits will have to do it. But anyway, it turns out Gerard's character is Scottish. Woo. So he's trying to get back to his daughter in the Hawaii, and he even asks for haggis, neeps and tatties, which is a delicious start. But then it turns out he's a whiny nationalist. Right at the start of the film, when he's asked about his career as a former RAF pilot, he complains. And now I'm hoping that this will play, so we'll see if it goes. Okay. If you can hear this. Oh, wow, I've got to play it, don't I?
The flight officer hasn't even come by yet.
Good.
Yep, hear it.
Okay, you can see it anyway.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Happy New Year.
And to you. Where you from?
Hong Kong, sir. Did my training at the Civil Aviation Department.
Yeah, I hear that's a great academy.
And you, sir? English, I'm guessing?
Hell no. I wouldn't lower myself. Nope. I'm Scottish. Although I did fly RAF transport years ago. Back then, all the sexy assignments went to the English blokes. I didn't mind, though, because for me, the heavies were an easy path into the airlines.
Well, there you go. Get some Scottish supremacism and some anti-English, casual and Anglophobia all in one go. Complaining all the sexy assignments went to English folk. And, you know, anyway, as a producer in the film, Gerard deliberately added that it doesn't even serve the character, isn't actually an embittered nationalist type. So it was just a bit, you know, it's like you're watching something, you expect some entertainment, and then in the middle of it, you're like, okay, that's not so good here. It's a bit like if he'd said, I'm working for the RAF, but TV commentators keep saying Scottish instead of British. So now I'm piloting this piece of junk. Anyway.
But as Mrs. Abraham Lincoln was famously asked, apart from that, how did you enjoy the movie?
Actually, the movie was all right. It's just it's daft. It's rubbish, you know. But it was okay. It's entertaining enough. But, you know, just another one of these whining and preaching, you know, celebrities, you know, Alan Cumming, Ewan McGregor, but of course, Brian Cox, give it a rest.
Exactly. And let's not forget, there are others, guys. I was going to say there are others. The B-list celebs who are also politicised their loviness. You've got Irvin Welsh.
Oh, yes.
Dougray Scott, who plays Ray Lennox in that thing. Douglas Henshaw, all of these guys, all fervently pro-independence, all massively anti-Rangers. And they all let this influence their work. Each one of them has done so. So, I mean, it's so bloody tedious. Just stop. We don't care who you vote for. We don't care which team you support or don't support, really.
Mark, do you have something to say on that?
Sorry, Mark, mate.
Yeah, I think it might be a remake of Braveheart, and he might be starring in that soon. So you never know.
Yes. Well, a remake might have some actual historical accuracy. It reminds me of that famous quote attributed to the movie producer Samuel Goldwyn when told by a screenwriter that a movie would send a powerful message. He said, "All I want is a story. If you have a message, send it by Western Union." Yeah. So get the message, Gerard. Don't infect your films with nationalist grievance. Just makes you look petty. Zoomer.
Well said.
Right. Okay, Mark, you are up in a second with your Zoomer. Right, here you go.
Mine is Stephen Flynn for his attitude, his demeanour at the weekend, and his and the wreath. Now I've heard, and I know, and I tweeted about it, and I got a lot of stick for it, saying, well, it's a Scottish wreath. It's that's why it was different. The labels differently. It's a tradition that they used the Scottish wreath. Well, that's complete nonsense, because Blackford used the same wreath as everybody else.
Yeah.
So did Sturgeon when she was ever in an event where she needed a wreath. She used the same one as everybody else. This changed, I think, last year when Blackford used the Scottish wreath, and I don't care. No one can tell me any different.
Can it not just go? Did it not just go get from to the same same shop? It's not like he's going to take a seat in the plane here. You know, if you can put my wreath here.
There's me all the way down. Exactly. Come on, buy one in London. For God's sake.
Just buy one in London with the other ones, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
It's plain politics, pure and simple. It's smaller wreath than the others. The label's different, and you just want to be different. That's all it is. It's plain politics.
Yeah.
It's something Salmond never did when on them occasions, because politics, you forget about politics. You just you don't want to stand out and be different to everybody else.
Right.
You know, you do the same as everyone else. You don't stand out. You just show respect. And it wasn't just the wreath. It was his whole demeanour, not singing the national anthem, and he just stood there as if he didn't want to be there. In my view, I would respect someone more if he just said, "I'm not going to, you know, I don't want to be there."
They're representing not just all the Scots, but all the Scots who died and who served in the wars, and that includes many people from all kinds of people. Right, just all kinds of ethnicities and religions and sexes and so on, everything. So it's really insulting when you say this person's representing, supposed to be representing our country, and they don't do that, as well. But perhaps that's because he was recently voted, Britain's hardest MP. Did you see that there?
Yeah, okay. I found that quite ridiculous. At first I found it really funny, but then on the serious side of it, I found it quite silly, because especially in the National, I had a big front page about it, and to me it says, what does that say to kids? What does that say to people growing up, that the hardest MP in Westminster? That's just nonsense. And it doesn't set a good example for kids growing up to be seeing that from politicians.
Well, actually, when in reading this and reading about it, I did read quite an interesting part. It said, because it was kind of treating it as a joke, and they're saying that he didn't actually have any not social media skills. He probably doesn't have those either, but that he doesn't have any martial arts skills. And it said, actually, in fact, he suffered from a serious condition called avascular necrosis since his teens, leaving him unable to walk without sticks or crutches for 17 years until a life-changing hip replacement in 2020, which is a bit more of an inspirational story, perhaps. Anyway, but I mean, I don't know if that's something that, as you say, should be really promoted. He's the, best up for a fight.
Well, to be quite honest with you, if they did a full page on what you've just said, which I didn't know, that would be more inspirational for people to listen to, rather than being voted the hardest man in Westminster.
Right. Anyway, okay. So moving on, we are just a few minutes over, so we can. It's you. I think actually, Mark, you are the one who can choose between your
candidate, Mark. Yes,
we have Mhairi McAllan, Gerard, Butler, and Stephen Flynn.
I want to go with Gerard Butler, to be honest with you, and I've just changed my mind. Changed my mind, because I was going to go Stephen Flynn, I think I'm going to go Gerard Butler, because that was just.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the thing is, it's like why you're spending, you're making a movie and you deliberately put that wee bit in. And it's not even in character. It's just like, English took all the good jobs. You're like, okay, so where does that go with you in the story? Well, it's not anything to do with the story. It's just, I'll just put something in there.
It just didn't make sense, that line.
Any sense at all. And just, it really is at the level of that TV commentators are stealing our water type of nonsense. Anyway, okay, another win, 2 weeks in a row for me in the Zoomer Stakes. Nick, okay, so huge thank you for you being with us on the show tonight. That's great. We'll leave you with the thought for the week, a short one. Look, it's not your money, it's taxpayers' money. Try treating it as your own for a change. So happy to have you on the show with us every week. A huge thank you to David Griffiths and to Mark Zegveldt for co-hosting. And we hope that Mhairi will get better for next week's show, which will be on Wednesday, November the 22nd. Please introduce a friend to the show if you think they may enjoy it, and hit that like button. So until then, thank you all, of course, as well, for all your comments. So many good ones tonight. And thank you for that as well. So we will see you next week. Okay,
thanks for guys. Thanks for all interaction. Well done, everyone.
Thank you.